Didn't I tell you or ask the question, why are people acting so brand new about this mass deportation? Do you realize how many times mass deportation took place against other groups? Asians. There was a ban on on Japanese people. They had a mass deportation in 1954 where they were rounding up Mexicans and crossing them back over the border. And you wouldn't believe the name of that operation. I, I, you had to have balls of steel to name your American operation using a racial slur. I'll be back. Hey, folks, I told you yesterday I was going to come back and upload a video today. Yes, this video I will be discussing the past history of mass deportation by other American presidents. I know that I've heard them talk about mass deportation in the past, like when it was concerning Obama. I think they said Bush did it too, but I don't recall hearing about it in the 50s. If I did, it might have slipped my mind. I'll be quite honest with you. I don't know too much about other groups' histories, maybe like I should. But one reason I was put off about learning about other groups' history is because of the anti-black sentiments. It's like when people show you so much disrespect and dislike, it's like, why do you want to learn about them? You know? Like, what have Native Black Americans done to you to make you have this anti-black sentiment? I never get an answer. But you know what I'm going to consider doing? A series called Remember When. Because I'm going to confront this anti-black sentiment with the purpose of the videos will be asking a question. Like, this is how you were treated in this country. You were treated like crap too. So where did the anti-black attitude come from? That's going to be the purpose of doing the videos. On other groups and the history of discrimination and racism that was inflicted upon them until they became anti-black. That's the truth. Ruth? Okay, so let's talk about what happened in 1954. It was a major immigration push, and they had the nerve, the gall to name that operation in 1954 Operation Wetback. Yes, they did. They sure did. They sure did. It's documented. Look it up. Let's get into this. July is scorching in Mexicali, the Mexican city just across the border from Calexico, California. Averages 108 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer, but temperatures often swell into the 120s. In 1955, thousands of disoriented people roamed the city streets, as the sun bore down on them. They had just been deposited there by American immigration officials. They had been picked up in the United States, where they had homes and jobs, and left in a city where they didn't know anyone. Doesn't that sound familiar? These Mexican immigrants have been caught in the snare of Operation Wetback, the biggest mass deportation of undocumented workers in United States history. As many as 1.3 million people may have been swept up in the Eisenhower-era campaign with a racist name, which was designed to root out undocumented Mexicans from American society. And here all this time you thought you guys were buddies. Why you guys didn't listen to us when we said they can't be trusted? Why did you guys just want to believe so badly that we were just being the victim? Somebody just wrote that in one of the shorts I did. Oh my God, talking about slavery is so old and tired. I'm like, why are you watching the video, dude? Do they understand themselves? The short-lived operation used military-style tactics to remove Mexican immigrants, some of them American citizens from the United States. This happened in 1954. Doesn't sound like it's happening today. Though millions of Mexicans had legally entered the country through joint immigration programs in the first half of the 20th century, Operation Wetback was designed to send them back to Mexico with the help of the Mexican government, which sought the return of Mexican nationals to alleviate a labor shortage. Border Patrol agents and local officials used military techniques and engaged in a coordinated tactical operation to remove the immigrants. Along the way, they used widespread racial stereotypes to justify their sometimes brutal treatment of immigrants. Inside the United States, anti-Mexican sentiment was pervasive, and harsh portrayals of Mexican immigrants as dirty, disease-bearing, and irresponsible were the norm. I'm reading this. As I'm reading this, I'm like, wow, that was what he campaigned. What does the Bible say? Is nothing new under the sun. This is what they do in this country is just recycled. Let's continue. During Operation Wetback, tens of thousands of immigrants were shoved into buses, boats, and planes and sent to often unfamiliar parts of Mexico where they struggled to rebuild their lives. In Chicago, 3 planes a week were filled with immigrants and flown to Mexico. In Texas, 25% of all of the immigrants deported were crammed onto boats later compared to slave ships, while others died of sunstroke, disease, and other causes while in custody. It's not clear how many American citizens were swept up in Operation Wetback, but the United States later claimed that 1.3 million people total were deported. However, some historians dispute that claim. Though hundreds of thousands of people were ensnared, says historian Kelly Little Hernandez, the number of deportees was drastically lower than the United States reported, likely closer to 300,000, due to immigrants who were caught, deported, and captured again after re-immigrating. It's impossible to estimate the total number of people deported under the program. Mass deportations of Mexican immigrants from the United States date to the Great Depression, when the federal government began a wave of deportations rather than include Mexican-born workers in the New Deal welfare programs. According to historian Francisco Valderrama, the United States deported over 1 million Mexican nationals, 60% of whom were U.S. citizens of Mexican descent during the 1930s. Valderrama told Fresh Air's Terry Gross that the program was referred to as repatriation to give it the sense of being voluntary. In reality, though, it was anything but. Despite a widespread belief among native-born Americans that Mexicans came to the United States to steal jobs from American workers, many were invited to the country to work in its fields. In 1942, the U.S. Mexican Farm Labor Program, also known as Operation Bracero, after the Spanish term for manual laborer, began. The program funneled Mexicans into the United States on a legal temporary basis in exchange for guaranteed wages and humane treatment, an attempt by the Mexican government to stave off the discrimination faced by earlier immigrants. Damn, they just... Ooh. Oh my God. Oh my God. How do you just treat people like that and think that the seeds you planted just will not come back? Do they ever think it's going to ever come? I guess they feel like, well, damn, we've been doing it so long. Let's go on. However, not all employers wanted to follow the guidelines or pay the 30-cent an hour guaranteed wage, about $4.51 in modern dollars. Nor did the Mexican government want Mexicans to work in Texas, which continued its discrimination against Mexican people, and the state was excluded from the program between 1942 and 1947. That's where wetbacks came in. The racial epithet was used to describe Mexicans who illegally entered Texas by crossing the Rio Grande River. The government turned a blind eye to Texans' employment of these undocumented immigrants, even after hiring undocumented workers was declared illegal. An estimated 4.6 million Mexicans entered the country legally through the Bracero program between 1942 and 1964, and states like California soon became dependent on Bracero workers. At the same time, hundreds of thousands of Mexican workers crossed the border without permission and found jobs on the farms of employers willing to flout the law. 1953, the government decided it had enough. By refusing to participate in the Bracero program, South Texas farmers essentially received their labor for less money than farmers who complied. The Border Patrol head Harlan B. Carter, a convicted murderer who killed a... Wait a minute. And Border Patrol head Harlan B. Carter, a convicted murderer who killed a Latino as a teenager in 1931 and who later headed the National Rifle Association, was frustrated by the sheer numbers of Mexican immigrants, both legal and undocumented, in the United States. He convinced President Eisenhower to ramp up immigration enforcement efforts. So Harlan Bart Carter was a convicted murderer. A murderer. And then he became the head of the NR. Okay, let's go on. In 1953, Carter tried to get the National Guard involved in a forerunner of Operation Wetback, but since the U.S. military is not supposed to be used to enforce domestic laws, he couldn't gain authorization to do so. Instead, in 1954, the government introduced Operation Wetback, which used Border Patrol resources instead. Operation Wetback may not have had troops, but it used military tactics and propaganda to achieve its goals. It was headed in part by General Joseph Swig, head of the Immigration and Naturalization Service, and was planned like a war strike. In an interview with the Los Angeles Times, Carter promised sweeps of factories, farms, and other workplaces, ending with the detention of undocumented workers in the holding facilities to await deportation. It would be the biggest drive against illegal aliens in history, Carter told the paper. News of the raids terrified Latinos in the United States, many of whom remember the wave of forced deportations in the 1930s. Damn, they kept doing this to you guys, and you still linked up with these racists against us? Wow. Historians have documented the behind-the-scenes wheeling and dealing that the United States participated in during Operation Wetback, deals that were not publicized at the time. Immigration officials threatened South Texas employers, some of whom had resorted to hiring armed guards to fend off Border Patrol officers with stepped-up raids and offer them watered-down versions of the Bracero program that let them get papers for their workers without committing to all of the program's strenuous requirements. As a result, the number of immigrants in the Bracero program grew as undocumented workers were deported. Operation Wetback was lawless. It was arbitrary. It was based on a lot of xenophobia, Hernandez told CNN in 2016. And it resulted in sizable, large-scale violations of people's rights, including the forced deportation of U.S. citizens. This sounds like it was written today. This article, I believe it was written in, if it wasn't 2016, it was 2018. Mexicans were deported out of America 3 different times from what I researched. If anyone know that, was more, please let me know in the comments. But from what I researched, it was a major, major deportation that happened in the 1930s. And then the other one was the 1954, the one I just read about. And then today. What's baffling to me is even though you guys have a history of knowing how this country treated you, why did you still link up with the racists? So I know you guys saw it just like we see it. When people discriminate or are racist against us, you guys saw it. But you guys were so willing to link up with these people who have shown you throughout the history of your people being in this country that they could not stand you. And when they got tired of you, they just kicked you out. Listen to this. I looked up how many Mexicans were, lost their lives during the 1954 deportation. They said they don't have an exact total figure, a number of Mexicans who, died during the 1950 deportation effort. They said it was numerous fatalities reported. They said it was deaths occurred due to inhumane conditions during transport and being left in dangerous, unfamiliar territories. They say heat exposure. Historian May Nagy documented that at least 88 people died from heat stroke during a roundup in 112-degree heat. An American labor official at the time noted that more would have died without Red Cross intervention. Drowning in one incident involving an overcrowded transport ship in the Gulf of Mexico. 5 deportees drowned after a riot broke out. The vessel's conditions were so poor that a congressional investigation compared it to an 18th century slave ship. Harsh conditions. Thousands of migrants were transported in overcrowded buses, boats, and planes, and many were unloaded in unfamiliar parts of Mexico far from their homes. Mexican labor leaders reported that some were left in the desert up to 15 miles from the border. Jeez Louise, that is crazy. Citing immigration documents, factcheck.org reports that Operation Wetback lasted a few months. Officials stopped shipping out Mexicans after some drownings caused a public outcry in Mexico. By the fall of 1954, funding for the program had begun to dry out. Fact Check says the government called the operation a success and said the border had been secured. All right, folks, that's what I have for you today. I hope you learned something like I did. Thank you for liking, commenting, sharing, and whatever you do to support this channel is greatly appreciated. Tell your family, friends, co-workers they want to learn about history, particularly Native Black American history in this country, check out this channel. And then I'm going to be talking about the history of other groups in this country. You know, if I feel it right now, the way I feel, I'm going to do it. So we'll see how I feel by tomorrow. All right, then. Other than that, thanks again. Those who rocked out and listened to this entire video, thank you. And I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.